Well, I'll be darned. Just when you believe you've mastered life, the universe finds a way to hit you squarely in the face to remind you how little control you actually possess. I should explain further. My name is David Reeves, and up until a few days ago, I was merely an ordinary man living the American dream here in Atlanta, a lovely home in Buckhead, a wonderful wife, a fantastic child, and a position at one of the city's premier law firms. I have been working tirelessly for years, clocking 60 to 70-hour weeks, doing whatever necessary to provide the best life for my family. I mean, we were enjoying nice trips to the Caribbean. Catherine was driving a brand new Mercedes, and our daughter Ava was attending one of those elite private schools. We thought we had it all, but I was completely mistaken and being duped. It began last Thursday. I was at the office, working late as usual, preparing for a major case upcoming. Suddenly, it was after 1 a.m., and I receive a text from Catherine questioning, "Where are you?" Followed by nearly a dozen question marks. I replied, "Working late, will be home soon," just like that. When I eventually got home around 2:30, the house was pitch black except for the TV shining in the den. There lay Catherine, asleep on the sofa, still in her outfit and makeup from earlier. I softly nudged her, and she woke up in a haze. "David, what time is it?" She mumbled, rubbing her eyes. "Late, darling, come on, let's head to bed." She stood up wobbly, and I supported her to prevent her from falling. She smelled of wine and cigarettes, which was odd since Catherine rarely drinks or smokes nowadays. As I assisted her upstairs, she suddenly gave me a messy kiss. "You know how much I adore you, right, darling?" she slurred. "You're the only man for me." I simply laughed and patted her back. "I love you too, dear. Let's get you some water." Fast forward to the next morning, and we're both preparing for work. Catherine had already styled her hair and was fully composed, as if nothing had occurred the previous night. Meanwhile, I was in the bathroom when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, just a sequence of random digits, no name attached. The message bluntly stated, "You might want to check your wife's phone." I stared at the message, baffled, and texted back, "Who is this?" but received no reply. Odd. I went downstairs to the kitchen where Catherine was fixing a travel mug of coffee, looking every inch the refined Atlanta socialite in her skirt suit. I leaned on the counter and showed her my phone. "Hey, honey, any clue who this number might be?" "They just suggested I check your phone." She glanced at it, and her complexion turned pale. "What? No, I don't know who that is," she stammered, avoiding my gaze and noticeably uneasy. Something felt off. "So, is there something you need to tell me?" I asked her directly, the text hinting at something dubious. "David," she interrupted, giving me a firm look. "Of course not. You know I would never do anything like that. Some people just thrive on causing trouble." I suppose she leaned in and kissed me quickly. "I have to go. I'm late for a meeting. We'll talk more tonight." "Okay," and with that, she was out the door. I remained there, phone in hand, more puzzled than ever. The whole interaction felt strange. Catherine has never been skilled at deception. If she was concealing something, she was failing miserably at hiding it. I decided to disregard it and headed out myself, trying to push it from my mind. I spent the day immersed in the usual legal hustle, negotiating, reviewing contracts, and resolving issues, yet that text from the mysterious number kept troubling me. Finally, I returned home around 8, and Catherine had surprisingly prepared a delightful dinner: chicken parmesan, garlic bread, the whole shebang. She was exceedingly attentive, continuously topping up my wine glass, inquiring about my day, laying it on thick, to be honest. Over dessert, I finally addressed the elephant in the room. "All right, what's going on? You've been acting really odd today." She adopts this fake, perplexed expression. "What do you mean?" I slide my phone across the table. "That text from this morning, why were you so shaken up by it? You know you can tell me anything, right?" She exhales deeply and reaches across to hold my hand. "David, you must believe me. I'm not involved in an affair or anything of that sort. I would never do that to you." She pauses and gives me those large, sad eyes that used to melt my heart. "It's just, well, I've been feeling somewhat insecure lately about my age, my appearance. You've been working so much. I guess part of me wondered if maybe you were, looking elsewhere, having second thoughts about us." She looks down at her plate, appearing vulnerable and embarrassed. I feel like a complete idiot. "Oh, honey, I only have eyes for you," I reassure her, squeezing her hand. "You're the most gorgeous woman in the world to me. Whatever that text was about, it doesn't matter. I trust you." She smiles with relief and wipes her eyes. I'm so fortunate to have you. I don't know what I'd do without you. We embrace, and she clings to me tightly. Over her shoulder, I notice her phone screen light up from a new text on the counter. I can't discern the contact name, but I see it's a string of messages from some guy saying things like, "Last night was incredible." My heart freezes. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Those texts on Catherine's phone replayed in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't escape. Last night was incredible. What was that supposed to mean? I hardly slept at all, just tossing and turning while Catherine slept peacefully beside me, oblivious to the world. By morning, I had dark circles under my eyes and a bitter taste in my mouth that no coffee could dispel. I went through the motions at work, my mind elsewhere. Those damning words haunted me every time I blinked. Eventually, I couldn't stand it anymore. I stepped out of a deposition and found myself searching online for private investigators in Atlanta. An hour later, I was sitting across from a guy named Frank in a nondescript strip mall office, pouring out my story. Frank looked like a typical detective from a casting call, portly, balding, wearing a crumpled suit that had seen better days, but he had a sharp, discerning gaze that told me he'd seen it all before. Hate to break it to you, pal, but 9 times out of 10, if a guy suspects his wife is cheating, he's probably right, Frank said, leaning back in his squeaky chair. Seen it more than I can count. I massaged my temples, feeling a migraine coming on. I can't believe Catherine would do this. It doesn't make any sense, I muttered. Frank shrugged. A lot of things don't make sense when it comes to the heart. People get bored, restless, start craving something new. It happens to the best of us. I cringed at his blunt words but knew he was speaking the truth. I took a deep breath and met his eyes squarely. All right, I need to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. What's your fee? We discussed the details, and I wrote him a check that made my stomach turn, but I knew I wouldn't find peace until I uncovered the truth. I headed home, dreading the thought of facing Catherine and acting as if everything were normal. I stopped at a bar near my office and downed a couple of bourbons to steady my nerves. When I finally staggered through the door, Catherine was lounging on the sofa, flipping through a magazine. She looked up and did a double take. Wow, you look terrible, honey. Everything okay? I forced a weak smile. Yeah, just a brutal day at work. Think I'm coming down with something? She frowned and approached to feel my forehead. Amen. You do feel a bit warm. Why don't you go lie down, and I'll bring you some soup. I nodded dully and trudged off to the bedroom, feeling like the world's biggest fool. Here I was, hiring a detective to keep tabs on my own wife, while she was downstairs acting like Florence Nightingale. What in the world was wrong with me? I tossed and turned, my mind in turmoil. Every kind word, every tender gesture from Catherine over the last few days now seemed fake, as if she was merely acting, trying to make up for her guilty conscience. 2 weeks later, I was awakened by the buzzing of my phone on the nightstand. I grabbed it clumsily and saw a message from an unknown number. My heart started pounding as I opened it. Got something you need to see. Meet me at the Waffle House off I-85 tomorrow at 6 a.m. Come alone. It had to be Frank. A wave of dread overwhelmed me. I knew right then that whatever he had found, it was going to be terribly bad. I slipped out of bed before dawn, being careful not to wake Catherine. I dressed quickly and sneaked out to my car. The Waffle House parking lot was empty except for a few big rigs. I spotted Frank's battered Honda and parked next to it. He was already sitting in a booth, bent over a cup of coffee and a clutter of papers. Morning, sunshine, he greeted as I slid into the booth opposite him. Hope you haven't eaten yet, because I guarantee you're about to lose your appetite. He pushed a manila envelope across the sticky table. I stared at it as if it were a bomb about to go off, afraid to touch it. Finally, I took a deep breath and opened it. I wasn't ready for what I saw. I felt like I was going to throw up right there in that grimy Waffle House booth. My stomach churned as I flipped through photo after damning photo. There was Catherine and my no-good brother Anthony, all over each other, like a pair of lustful teenagers. In my car, the one I let her use, parked at a sleazy motel near the airport. But that wasn't even the worst of it. There's more. Frank's gravelly voice broke through my mental fog. Brace yourself. He slid a flash drive across the table. My hands trembled as I plugged it into my laptop, unsure if I could handle any more. The video began to play, and my heart almost stopped. It was some kind of party, but unlike any I had ever seen. Dozens of couples, all dressed elegantly, milled around what looked like a luxurious penthouse, sipping champagne and chatting. But something was off. The way they looked at each other, the way they touched, it wasn't right. The camera panned and zoomed in on two figures in the corner, partially concealed behind a potted palm. My breath hitched. Catherine and Anthony, not just kissing but passionately making out, oblivious to the world. I watched in stunned silence as the party escalated into outright debauchery. Clothes began to come off, and right in the center, my wife and my brother were indulging like beasts for everyone to see. I slammed the laptop shut, bile rising in my throat. I couldn't watch anymore, it was too overwhelming. What the hell kind of party was that? I choked out, my voice sounding alien to my own ears. Frank leaned back, interlacing his fingers behind his head. It's called a key party. A bunch of rich, bored suburbanites get together to spice up their sex lives, swapping wives, husbands, whatever. Looks like your brother and sister-in-law wanted in on the action. But I felt dizzy, as if the room was spinning. This couldn't be happening, not to me, not to us. We had a life, a family. The next few days were a blur. I felt as if I were living in an alternate reality, just going through the motions while my mind spun wildly. I'd come home from work, and there she'd be, just bustling around the kitchen, making dinner as if nothing had happened, smiling at me, asking about my day. I could barely meet her eyes without feeling nauseous. All I could see was her bare body entwined with Anthony's, putting on a show for those depraved onlookers. I started making excuses to work late, immersing myself at the office, until the cleaning crew kicked me out around midnight, doing anything to avoid being near her. The hurt and rage were like a physical pain, a dull, throbbing ache in the pit of my stomach. One night, I was parked outside a dingy bar off Ponce, nursing a bourbon and watching the door. Frank had tipped me off that this was one of Anthony's usual spots, and sure enough, around 10 p.m., there he was, walking out with that signature smirk plastered across his face. I watched him jump into his BMW and speed off, likely heading to meet someone else's wife. But the idea of confronting him right there crossed my mind. I could follow him, catch him red-handed, and thrash him until he was barely recognizable on the pavement. But I held back. As much as I wanted to make him pay, I knew I had to be strategic about this, line up all the evidence before making a move. I started documenting everything, saving incriminating texts and emails, recording phone conversations, and tracking their movements via the location sharing on our phones. I was like a man obsessed, tirelessly gathering proof of their betrayal. It was during one of those late nights at the office that it dawned on me. I was looking over the photos and videos from Frank again, my jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. That's when I noticed the background, the art, the furniture, the sweeping view of the Atlanta skyline. This wasn't just any random penthouse. I recognized that place instantly. It was the Residences, that swanky high-rise in Buckhead where my old fraternity brother Parker lived. He was a big-shot developer who often boasted about hosting wild, no-holds-barred parties like you'd see on reality TV. That's when it struck me this was my chance to catch Catherine and Anthony in the act, to expose their sordid affair to everyone they knew, to bring their entire twisted world crashing down around them. I began devising a plan, considering every possible scenario. By the time I left the office at 3 a.m., I had it all mapped out. I was going to that party, and I was determined to ensure everyone there saw my wife and brother for the deceitful cheaters they were. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I was a man possessed, setting up the pieces while maintaining appearances at home and work. I managed to secure an invitation to Parker's next big event by fibbing a bit about being interested in joining his country club. He lapped it up. Of course, the man was an absolute charmer. Meanwhile, I was secretly funneling money into a separate account, saving up cash and preparing for the fallout. I even reached out to an old buddy from law school who was now a high-end divorce lawyer in Buckhead. He filled me in on how to safeguard my assets and secure custody of Ava if it came to that. I was leaving nothing to chance. Finally, the night of the party arrived. I was surprisingly calm as I dressed in a fresh suit, ready for the performance of a lifetime. Catherine eyed me suspiciously as I got ready. "You're awfully dressed up," she remarked. "What's the occasion?" I forced a smile. "Oh, didn't I tell you? I got invited to a party organized by my client tonight. You remember him, Michael Cooper from Georgia? I didn't realize you two were still close. What can I say? The guy is a real friend," I said with a wink. "Might be a late night, so don't wait up with that." I grabbed my keys and left, leaving her looking utterly bewildered. Showtime. The party was everything I had imagined and more. The penthouse at the residences was a sprawling, modern mansion with a view overlooking the entire city. The place was crammed with Atlanta's elite CEOs, celebrities, old money types all dressed to the nines and dripping in jewels. I grabbed a glass of scotch from a passing tray and tried to blend in, keeping my eyes peeled for any sign of Catherine or Anthony. The crowd was a sea of tuxedos and glittering cocktail dresses, beautiful people laughing a bit too loudly as they sipped their overpriced champagne. Then I spotted them. Catherine was in a skin-tight red dress that left little to the imagination, her hair and makeup flawless, not a single blonde strand out of place. And there was Anthony, looking like the smarmy scoundrel he was, in a tailored suit, clinging to her arm and whispering in her ear. They were the epitome of an upscale couple on the prowl. I felt a white-hot surge of rage, but forced myself to stay composed. Not yet. I needed to bide my time, waiting for the perfect moment to spring my trap. Clutching my drink, I began to weave through the crowd, keeping my targets in view. All night, I trailed them from room to room, observing as they mingled and schmoozed without a care in the world. All the while, I could feel the weight of the tiny voice recorder in my pocket, primed to capture every incriminating word. Eventually, they drifted away from the main party and headed down a hallway. I hung back, following at a distance, my heart pounding. When I rounded the corner, I saw them enter a room at the end of the hall, marked by a faint red light glowing from underneath. I approached cautiously and tried the door. It was unlocked. Taking a deep breath, I pushed it open just a crack and peered inside. What I saw still haunts my dreams. It was akin to those bizarre eyes wide shut parties, masked men and women everywhere on beds, chairs, against the walls. And right there in the middle were Catherine and Anthony. That's when I saw red. I couldn't take it anymore. With a ferocious roar, I charged into the room, pushing people aside left and right. I screamed at Anthony, grabbed him by the hair, and yanked him away from my wife. People were screaming, fleeing the room as the chaos spilled into the hallway. Then, I felt hands on me, trying to pull me back. I whirled around, fist raised, and came face to face with Catherine. She looked utterly shocked, her perfect makeup smeared and running down her cheeks. "David, oh my God, what are you doing here?" she cried, clutching a sheet around her. "Exposing you two for the sick freaks you are," I bellowed so loudly that my voice cracked. "Did you really think you could betray me like this and get away with it? I have everything, every text, every video, every moment of your depraved affair with my own brother, all of it. And I'm going to make sure everyone we know sees the truth about what kind of people you really are." Behind her, Anthony was curled up on the floor. "Don't even bother coming home. It's all over," I growled, turning and storming out. The drive home was a blur. I don't know how I made it back to Buckhead in one piece. My mind was racing, my hands shaking so badly I could barely insert my keys in the front door. I barged inside, slamming it hard enough to rattle the windows. "Ava, honey, are you up?" I shouted, my voice cracking with emotion. I needed to tell her, to prepare her for the storm that was about to descend on our lives. I heard footsteps on the stairs, and there was my little girl, my pride and joy, looking frightened in her pajamas. "Dad, what's going on?" What happened? Her blue eyes were wide with fear and confusion. I opened my mouth to explain, but all that came out was a choked sob. Ava rushed over and threw her arms around me, hugging me tightly. "Dad, you're scaring me. Talk to me, please." I held her close, burying my face in her hair. She still smelled like baby shampoo and childhood innocence. How was I going to shatter that? "Your mother," I managed between ragged breaths. "She's been cheating on me, baby, with your Uncle Anthony." Ava stiffened in my arms. "What? No, that's not possible. They wouldn't. I saw it with my own eyes," I said firmly. "The photos, videos, they've been carrying on an affair for months at these parties, where people just—" I couldn't bring myself to describe the debauchery I'd witnessed. The thought of sullying Ava's innocence made me sick. She pulled back, her face paling. "Oh my God. I don't. I can't." She looked around wildly, as if the room was spinning. Hey, it's okay," I said, grabbing her shoulders to stabilize her. "We're going to be okay, you hear me? Whatever happens, I'm not leaving. It's you and me, kid." She nodded, her eyes brimming with tears, and fell back into my arms. We just stood there in the entryway, holding each other and crying for what felt like forever. Eventually, Ava's sobs subsided, and she pulled away, wiping her eyes. "What are we going to do?" she asked in a small voice. I took a deep, shuddering breath, feeling an eerie sense of calm wash over me. Well, first thing tomorrow, I'm calling my lawyer. We're going to file for divorce. Get things started on separating from your mother. Ava winced at the word divorce as if I'd struck her. But does it have to be that way? Maybe if I held up a hand to stop her. Ava, I saw what I saw with my own eyes. There's no coming back from that, no way to rebuild trust after such a massive betrayal. Not just from your mother, but from Anthony too. I felt a flicker of rage reignite in my chest at the thought of my own brother's disgusting actions. I quickly smothered it. I had to stay strong for my little girl's sake. Your mom made her choices, and now she has to live with the consequences. I won't allow myself or you to be dragged down with her. Ava nodded slowly, tears welling up again. I think I need to go lie down, of course. Honey, I pulled her in for one more hug. It's going to be okay. You'll see. As long as we have each other, we'll get through this. I promise. She gave me a brave smile and headed upstairs. I watched her go, my heart aching for the pain she was enduring, a pain I had caused by exposing this ugliness. But I knew I had done the right thing. The truth had to come out, no matter how devastating. Catherine and Anthony's sick betrayal could stay hidden no longer. I poured myself a triple shot of bourbon and drained it in one fiery gulp. It was going to be a long, sleepless night. My mind raced with a million thoughts and plans. I needed to take control of our finances before Catherine got any ideas about cleaning me out. I had to figure out living arrangements, whether to fight for keeping the house or just start fresh somewhere new. And oh God, how was I going to explain this to our parents, our friends? The humiliation and shame threatened to swallow me whole. I thought about calling my lawyer Rick right then and there, but I was too worked up, too raw. I needed to be clear-headed before taking those first crucial steps. Instead, I pulled out my laptop and started documenting everything while it was still fresh in my mind. I typed out a detailed account of what I'd seen at the party, the shocking depravity, the confrontation with Catherine and Anthony. I copied over all the photos, videos, texts, and other evidence I'd compiled, wanting to make sure I had an ironclad case by the time the sun started peeking over the horizon. I had a multi-page file ready to send to Rick first thing in the morning. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction, knowing that I had the ammunition to not only leave Catherine but to bury her if I needed to. I finally passed out on the couch around 7 a.m., physically and emotionally drained. I don't know how long I slept, but I was jostled awake by the sound of the front door opening. I sat up, my heart pounding, as Catherine blew in, looking utterly disheveled. Her hair was a mess, her makeup smeared and running, and the tight red dress she'd been wearing was wrinkled and askew, the neckline torn halfway down her chest. She froze when she saw me, her eyes wide with fear. "David, you're here," she stammered, clutching her purse to her chest. I stood up slowly, feeling a strange surge of empowerment as I confronted her. "Yeah, I'm here, all right, waiting for you to come slinking back after your night of excess," I declared. She opened her mouth to respond, but I raised my hand to silence her. "Don't bother with lies or excuses, Catherine. I saw it all, the party, the antics, you and Anthony behaving like wild animals, for everyone to see." Tears welled up in her eyes as her expression collapsed. "Oh God, David, I'm so sorry. You have to believe me," she pleaded. "Save it," I growled. "We're done. I'm filing for divorce first thing in the morning, and I'm going to ensure everyone knows exactly what sort of degenerate behavior you two have indulged in." She let out a choked sob, reaching out to me pleadingly. "No, please, David, we can work through this. It was just a lapse, a moment of weakness. I still love you. You're my everything." I laughed bitterly and shook my head. "You're unbelievable. You know that?" Still lying to my face after I caught you red-handed. "Well, it's too late for that now." I stepped closer, towering over her. She shrank back, a look of genuine fear in her eyes. "I want you out of this house by tomorrow night. Go stay with your mother, your sister. I don't care. Just be gone. And if you're not, I'll have the police remove you." She opened her mouth again, but I stopped her. "And don't even think about trying to take Ava. After what you've done, you're lucky if I even allow you visitation." With that, I brushed past her and headed upstairs, leaving her sobbing in the entryway. I felt like a weight, an anvil, had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in days, I could breathe again. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings with lawyers, realtors, and financial advisors as I began executing my exit plan. Rick, my bulldog of a divorce attorney, was practically drooling when I laid out the entire sordid tale for him. Adultery, deviant sexual behavior, I had all the evidence any lawyer could dream of. "David, my man, with what you've got here, we're going to take her to the cleaners," he said, rubbing his hands together. "She won't be able to show her face in the junior league again when I'm through with her." I have to admit, there was a dark part of me that relished the thought of publicly humiliating Catherine, of making her feel even an ounce of the pain and betrayal she'd inflicted on me. But then I'd look at the framed family photos on Rick's desk, smiling shots of him with his wife and kids, and my heart would ache. No matter how angry I was, I didn't want to do anything to traumatize Ava more than this whole mess already had. She was my priority now, protecting her and helping her navigate this as best I could. Speaking of Ava, she had been my anchor during those first few days after the truth came out. While Catherine was off somewhere drowning in her sorrows and avoiding me, Ava stayed by my side every moment she could. We'd sit out on the back patio in the evenings, sipping sweet tea and watching the sunset over the Chattahoochee River in our backyard. She'd hold my hand and just let me vent, getting all the hurt and rage off my chest without judgment. "I don't know how I'm going to face everyone, baby girl," I confided one night, staring down into my glass. "Your mum's family, our friends, the whole country club. How can I even show my face after this humiliation?" Ava squeezed my hand tighter and looked me straight in the eye, her jaw set in that determined way that reminded me so much of her grandmother. "Who cares what any of them think, Dad? You didn't do anything wrong here. Mum and Uncle Anthony are the ones who should be ashamed, not you." I felt a surge of pride at her maturity and resilience. "You just have to hold your head high and show them you're not going to let this break you," she continued fiercely. "We're Reeves, remember? We're stronger than that." I pulled her in for a fierce hug, blooming with love and gratitude for her. "You're absolutely right, kiddo. As long as I've got you in my corner, I can make it through anything in those first few weeks." Ava was the one who helped me keep my head above water. She took over cooking our meals, cleaning the house, handling things with her typical efficiency and determination. Whenever despair began to encroach, Ava was there with a hug, an encouraging word, or just a silly joke to help me smile, despite the agony. While Catherine was away staying with her sister, Ava and I dug in and started rebuilding our lives, one small step at a time. We took long walks around our neighborhood every evening, greeting the neighbors and pretending everything was normal, even though the reality felt like a waking nightmare. One evening, as we strolled past the Hendersons' home, Mrs. Henderson, a kind elderly lady who had been our neighbor for years, came out bustling with a pecan pie in her hands. "David, Ava, I've been meaning to catch you too," she called out in her thick southern drawl. I heard the most terrible rumors at the club, and I just had to see for myself. If why all were all right, my heart sank, of course. The news was already spreading through the community like wildfire. I felt Ava stiffen beside me as we approached Mrs. Henderson's porch. "Well now, you don't need to say a thing if you don't want to," the elderly lady continued, eyeing us with genuine concern. "I just wanted you to know that the whole neighborhood is here for you. Whatever you might be going through," she handed me the pie with a warm smile. "My famous pecan pie always helps get through the tough times. Take care of yourselves now, you hear?" Blinking back unexpected tears, Ava and I thanked her profusely as we continued on our way, the sweet, nutty aroma of the pie surrounding us. A tiny spark of hope flickered back to life. Maybe we didn't have to go through this alone. Maybe, just maybe, there were people in our corner who could look past the scandal and simply care about us. Over the next few days, gestures of support and kindness kept coming. Casseroles and cakes appeared on our doorstep from well-meaning neighbors. My assistant at the office gave me a tight hug, telling me she was there if I needed anything at all. Even a few guys from my Sunday morning basketball group reached out to see if I wanted to grab a beer, no questions asked. It was as if the community I had been a part of for years, the one I thought would shun me after this, was circling the wagons around Ava and me, protecting us, letting us know that we didn't have to face this with our heads hung in shame. With each act of kindness, each warm smile, or squeeze of the shoulder from a friendly face, I found myself standing a little taller. The anger and bitterness began to slowly dissipate, replaced by a newfound sense of strength and resilience. Yes, Catherine's betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but I realized it defined me only as much as I allowed it to. Thanks to my amazing daughter and the support of my community, I was discovering the power to define myself anew. I wasn't just some poor schmuck who had been cheated on by his wife. I was David Reeves, a man of integrity, a dedicated father, and someone who could survive anything as long as he had the right people by his side. That evening, Ava and I sat in the backyard, watching the fireflies blink over the river, the pecan pie Mrs. Henderson had made sitting between us. You know, when this whole nightmare started, I thought I'd lost everything, I said, squeezing Ava's hand. I really believed your mum's actions had broken me in a way I'd never recover from. Ava looked at me with those wise beyond her years eyes, staying silent and letting me continue. But this past week, all the kindness and support from our friends and neighbors, it's made me realize how wrong I was. Yeah, your mum did me about as dirty as a person can get, but she didn't break me, she didn't even come close. I gestured out at the peaceful scene around us, the river glittering in the moonlight, the sweet smell of wisteria blooming in the distance. This is my world, baby girl, this community, these people who have our backs no matter what. As long as I've got this, got you, then I've got everything. I need to keep going and be happy. Your mum can't take that away from me, I stated. Ava's eyes sparkled with unshed tears as she leaned in and embraced me tightly. I'm so proud of you, Dad, she whispered. You're the strongest person I know, as I held my daughter close under the starry night sky. A deep sense of peace and gratitude enveloped me. Catherine's betrayal no longer held any sway over me. I was determined to survive this ordeal and emerge stronger and more joyful than ever before. This was merely the beginning of my new life, and I had everything necessary to make it a wonderful one.